How do you design an office tower around Grand Central Terminal?
Architecture Codex. If you want to see more, subscribe.
It stands today as a monument to 20th century aspirations, while around it, 21st century towers devour the airspace it once dominated. This is the Pan Am Building, now known as the MetLife Building, that soars from the terrain of Grand Central Terminal. It was built in 1963 and designed by Walter Gropius, with others. I have seen videos that claim that the Pan Am Building is the most hated building in New York City. These critics seem to be detached from reality and are simply repeating things they have gotten elsewhere. It shows that independent critical thinking is still a rare thing. I have traced this to them parroting a misguided and slightly tongue-in-cheek cover article on the June 1987 edition of New York Magazine. That's the one without the cartoons. They conducted a reader survey and assumed the results reflected the feelings of all New Yorkers, when in actuality it probably just reflected the opinions of Upper West Side yuppies and Upper East Side trust fund ne'er-do-wells who do nothing but snort coke and repeat things they've been told just so they can pretend that they matter. The articles and various critics and videos claim that people hated it because it blocked the view of Grand Central Terminal. It does not. Or that it blocked the vista of Park Avenue. But it doesn't do that either. There was no vista up or down that wasn't already blocked by Grand Central Terminal, and since 1929, what we call the Helmsley Building. The Helmsley Building at 565 feet is 70% of the height of the Pan Am Building and occupied the space, providing a vertical visual terminus for Park Avenue from the north and south, and provided a great marker on how far you were away from Grand Central Terminal. The Pan Am Building provided a taller marker doing the same thing. It being bigger was appropriate, as the buildings along Park Avenue were already being replaced with taller buildings, including the Lever House, the Seagram's Building, and the Union Carbide Building, among many others. I suggest that the creators of these videos actually go to the places they're talking about and evaluate the script that AI wrote for you. That way you can avoid spreading disinformation. One negative reviewer claimed it was also controversial because of its height, 59 stories, 808 feet. But at the time, New York City was used to tall buildings. Duh, the Empire State, the Chrysler Building, 40 Wall Street, the RCA Building, and 70 Pine Street were already much taller. And some journalists at the time did claim its size would overwhelm the urban infrastructure, but they were wrong. By the way, we are in the midst of the building heights getting even taller, with One Vanderbilt and the J.P. Morgan Tower, and the foreboding proposed 175 Park Avenue project, which will be twice as tall as the Pan Am Building. So critics of the Pan Am Building should just chill. Soon you'll be hearkening back to these as the good old days. These negatively bent videos also claimed the opposition to the Pan Am Building started the architectural preservation movement. It did not, because the Pan Am Building is north of Grand Central, over the train yards, and did not impinge on Grand Central Terminal itself. What did start the architectural preservation movement was the buildings proposed that were built over or instead of Grand Central Terminal, which were particularly scary as the glorious Penn Station was already facing demolition. Another detractor claimed that the Pan Am Building stuck out like a sore thumb, showing their lack of understanding of urban planning. The Pan Am Building was meant to be seen, and it's important to occasionally have figural buildings that are visible from different parts of a city. And then they went on to say that as a sore thumb, it was flipping the bird to New York City. So the critic might not be from New York City, because every New York City person knows that extending your thumb is not flipping the bird, but that might have been their concept of what wit is. But enough of the purveyors of stupid architectural videos. Since its inception, Grand Central Terminal, Architecture Codex video number 21, was a real estate development plan as much as a major train station. Various large office and housing projects had been proposed, and it has taken decades for some of them to be built. So an office tower very close to Grand Central Terminal was always part of the plan. What provoked ire were those proposals that threatened Grand Central Terminal itself. By the mid-20th century, the railroads were struggling financially, and Robert Young, the CEO of the New York Central Railroad, owners of Grand Central Terminal, saw operating the terminal was at a $6 million a year loss. He engaged developer-builder Irwin Wilson to leverage the airspace above the terminal with income-producing real estate. Earlier schemes, including this hyperboloid by I.M. Pei and another designed by Fellheimer and Wagner, proposed the demolition of Grand Central Terminal. This is where there was public backlash. In 1955, Emery Roth and Sons, often the architect of record for famous architect buildings, presented a design that preserved the terminal and would build about 3 million square feet of space in a 50-story tower above the tracks that were covered since 1910. For obvious reasons, this was more acceptable to the public. In 1958, Wilson brought on Walter Gropius of the Bauhaus School fame and Pietro Belluschi, a prolific and influential, yet not famous, Italian-American architect, to work with Richard Roth of Emery Roth and Sons. It appears that Gropius suggested rotating the Emery Roth Tower so that it presided over Park Avenue. He also wanted to introduce texture to the facade to avoid what was becoming a skyscraper cliché, all steel and glass. The exterior would use precast concrete mixed piers with sparkling angular quartz aggregate that glittered as the sun moved and that created deep recesses, allowing shadows to keep the facade appearance dynamic. The facade north and south is divided into 3 tapers to make the tower appear differently as the sun moves across the sky, using daylight to reduce the visual mass of its slab. Mechanical floors have a colonnade producing an articulated separation of the tower, one of the first modern towers to do so. The lower 8 floors were clad in granite. In November 1959, the revised design was announced, 55 stories tall, but only 2.4 million square feet of space. By 1960, developer Irwin Wilson brought on a major tenant, Pan American Airlines. The architectural symbolism of an airline presiding over a railroad was poetic. In the movie 2001, a Pan Am clipper ship, a space shuttle, sails from Earth to a space station. And I can't help but wonder if the Pan Am building itself inspired the proportions of the monolith. The simple answer is no. For many years, a helicopter service operated off the roof. This would allow an executive to take a train from the northern suburbs, catch a helicopter to JFK, and fly off to other parts of the world. A jet-set dream. But this ended after a 1977 fatal accident. Since then, all helicopter traffic and landing pads are on the river's edge around Manhattan Island. The critics who worried about the scale of the building have been proven wrong. But critics tend not to be architects and get paid by simply writing words. They don't actually have to build anything. Architects, by our nature, tend to see things that aren't there, and by picturing them can make design decisions. That's why the position, size, and nature of the Pan Am building turned out to be brilliant. I find the Pan Am building design powerful and modern. I think the pushback on previous designs that demolished Grand Central Terminal or the Helmsley building were valid and I think the architects ultimately did an excellent job nesting Pan Am between those two historic buildings, giving them protection and a new prominence in a city that was continuing to change and grow taller. I think its integration via escalators with the main concourse of Grand Central Terminal is genius. I think Gropius's initiatives on the facade, both orientation and texture, work beautifully with the modern urban landscape. This is not a boring glass box. The building is not afraid to stand tall and be seen, and the movement of light across it as the day progresses is subtle and dynamic. If you truly hate this building, then it's more about the demons inside of you than the architecture. In 1980, MetLife bought the building, and they changed the sign, but that has not diminished the quality of the building. After the Pan Am building was built, the Penn Central Railroad, the new owners of the New York Central Railroad, wanted to build another tower directly over Grand Central Terminal. In 1967, various designs by Marcel Breuer either demolished or totally swallowed the venerable terminal. These designs were hated. Fortunately, with the demolition of Pennsylvania Station starting in 1963, New York City created their Landmarks Commission in 1965. So the legal mechanism to stop the Breuer designs were in place. Admittedly, I was a toddler when the Pan Am building was built, but growing up around and in New York City, I never got the sense it was hated, nor any negative vibe about it. And in fact, I've often used the Pan Am building to find Grand Central Terminal. As a reader of New York Magazine at the time, I just regarded the article as whining from some silly rich people who don't produce anything anyway. And I don't hate those critics, I actually pity them. The hate they have will eat inside of them, and that's punishment enough. But they will never really fully understand how wrong they were. And if I insist on calling it the Pan Am building and not MetLife, that's not hate either. It's because Pan Am evokes something more romantic. It talks about world travel, implying pilots taking us through the clouds into the upper stratosphere. Whereas MetLife implies a building filled with actuaries calculating probabilities. And you probably know the joke. An actuary is a person who just didn't have enough personality to become a certified public accountant. So don't hate the Pan Am building. I'm Michael Molinelli, and this is Architecture Codex.